My latest book is The Art of Batting. It delves deep into how the best players ever made their runs. Get your copy today. Good Areas Live. Jarrod Kimber here on the Wagon Wheel after seconds earlier doing another show with Bayram for the Ashes. But yeah, as Bayram said, I've been sick a little bit. So when I do have energy, I figure I might as well try and do as much as possible, and then I'll go back to sleeping as I have been. If you want to ask questions on the Wagon Wheel, because that's what the show is, answering your questions, the best way to do it is if you're watching live, you can put them up as super chats on YouTube. If not, you can support us on Patreon like Manon has. So you can go to the Good Areas podcast Patreon channel and find us there. And Manon has done that. And he said, the idea of letting a touring team decide whether to bat or bowl has been picking up steam again. Do you think we could head towards that? What would prevent it? So it was trialled in England first class cricket and county cricket. Was it both divisions or just Division 2? And I was massively for it. The players seemed a little bit ambivalent about whether it actually made any difference or not. But for me, I thought it was a very good idea. And I've kind of always thought it was a good idea. These days, it's so hard to win test matches away from home. Maybe the last couple of years when the chaos has come in, that's not quite as much the case. But over the last, since the 2000s, especially as draws have disappeared, most of the draws have gone towards wins for home teams. And so there was an element for a while there of that. I haven't looked at the data enough to see if that is something that is worth doing again now. But I definitely, I kind of fundamentally agree with the idea of the opposition. You should be able to make whatever pitch you want, but the opposition get to choose when they use it. Like, I kind of think that makes the most cricket sense and always has. I don't know if it's going to change things as much as people perhaps think it might, but hopefully it makes things a little bit more even. Connor says, you mentioned Mark Chapman using a similar approach to a golf club fitting to figure out what bat specs work best for him. What metrics was he looking at? And is this commonplace now, or are most pros still doing it primarily by feel? I think lots of players do it in very different ways. And so there are a lot of players who just want the bat to feel good when they have it. And then you get guys who are, like, I think Steve Smith's maybe one of the best examples of this, who kind of knows exactly what he's looking for at all time. So there's no one way of doing it, the same way that there isn't probably with golf players or tennis players or anyone else, right? Like, you have to do what makes sense to you. I've talked to batters who've said things like, it's going to sound a bit weird, but I almost think that you can think too much about the bat, right? And you get yourself into this position where you're almost panicking that you don't have, that bat on that day isn't working. And so you have to keep changing bats and you end up in a bad space. And I've talked to other people who are like, there are a lot of players who would be better if they just understood more about bats and technology. So I don't think there's an exact science to this, but there are players who, I know there are a lot of players who, because of golf, and I think, baseball has also played a little bit of part in this, and understanding swing dynamics and everything else, of being like, actually the best bat for me is this. And we'll probably, there might already be these guys, but I haven't heard of it. But I think there might actually be people in the future who will run tests on players to be able to tell them the exact kind of bats they need for the exact kind of surfaces. That's probably where we are going in cricket, just because it's hard for the players to keep all that information in their heads. So let's say you're playing a test, you're going to the West Indies, your Sabina Park bat and your Guyana bat are going to be very, very differently. So having that sorted before you get there and feeling comfortable with those decisions, I think is a really important thing. Anil says, how does the IPL revenue stream work in terms of player brand value? Basically, is there a large enough financial incentive for teams to retain marquee players just because of their brand value, crowd pull, and revenue? I mean, I think Dhoni and Virat probably do that, and maybe Rohit to a slightly lesser extent. I don't think there's many other players that change the numbers, right? Like, certainly foreign players. Maybe AB at his height, Dre Ross at his height, but they're still so good. It's because they're really, really good. So if you're talking about a player who's not playing as well, like Dhoni is the obvious one. Dhoni could sell out almost any stadium in India, right? Like, just by turning up in a way that even Virat maybe doesn't quite get to, even now. There seems to be like Dhoni fans everywhere. So I do think there's an element of that. Of being a part. But yeah, there's certainly, though, the other element, which I think is what Robbie was talking about recently when we were doing the podcast is there is an element of pleasing owners, pleasing sponsors, and everything else, and having the right faces. So you do have to think about who the players are, and right, and having Steve Smith on your roster and not even playing probably still helps a little bit with marketing. And Kane Williamson certainly I would put on that as well, right? Those sorts of players, Pat Cummins would be another one. So, if we're looking outside the Indian players, and it's the same with, maybe even having a Indian player like someone like Robbie or Raidu, or I'm trying to think of, another kind of a well-known Indian player who's been around for a long time, who may not play all the games, but might still look good on the poster, right? I think there's an element of that in cricket that plays a part. So you've got to look at the entire board when you're doing these sorts of things, right? Like, that's the one thing I noticed when I was, running teams, is that there's so many extra things that you need to factor in about how you put a team together that isn't just, can I put the best 11 on the field or the best 15 in a squad or the best 24? Neil says, watch Moneyball. I assume the concept is likely to only transfer across to franchise cricket rather than national teams. Still think that international cricket is largely institution instinct driven, given that is what most players and coaches prefer over data. Moneyball's been in cricket for 20 years, Neil. Moneyball is like old cricket at this point. So Moneyball started getting used in cricket in the early 2000s when the book came out. So before the movie, Canada cricket was already starting. There were lots of people coming through looking at data and trying to work out trends and everything. Moneyball was certainly a big part in Rajasthan, North Ants, Sunrisers, Scorchers. I can name heaps of teams. Internationally, England was using Moneyball sort of thinking in their 2015 to 2019 reign. It was used in their Test cricket reign. The England camp was huge in Moneyball. So Nathan Lehman, Andrew Strauss, missing someone else. Owen Morgan, maybe not as much Owen Morgan. But there were heaps of people involved in that at the time. So there was certainly plenty of data revolution when it came to that. West Indies were inspired by it a little bit as well, and with their T20 revolution. So yeah, it's been a done. We're so far beyond Moneyball. Moneyball's like so out of date with the way that people do things now. There's a great book, which is still probably also a little bit out of date, but a great book sort of showing you where the future is, which is called The MVP Machine by, is it Ben Lindbergh or Sam Miller? I know those two have written a book together, but I think it's by only one of them, that one. Some of it's dated badly because one of their players in that book, who is sort of put up as a bit of maybe a hero's bit kind, but he has not aged well, that person. Josh Ward says, if Shane Bond remained healthy for his whole career, would he be a top 10 pace bowler post-World War II? My nostalgia tells me he was as good as Steyn. Don't think I may have him as good as Steyn. Let me just have a look at how many tests he plays. 18, 17, 18. There we go. 87 wickets at 22. Let's just try and quickly break those down. Where did he play those test matches? So struggled in one series in Australia. I think that was a really flat pitch series, though, if I remember. Because I remember thinking he was going to go nuts. It's so hard to tell you how good he's going to be here, mate. And the reason is that he has 87 wickets. 49 of those are at home. And he never took more than 13 anywhere else. And the 13 he took were in Zimbabwe. I don't think I have him on Steyn's level. Trying to think of who the best 10 seam bowlers are since World War II. I mean, most of the best seam bowlers are since World War II. I think he had a shot of being in that list, right? Maybe even, how tall is Shane Bond? I feel like that could play a little bit of, 185. He's quite strong though. He was kind of fast, strong. There was a bit of like Ryan Harris about him in that they just felt this incredible strength and the way the ball hit your bat, sort of like Flintoff, those sorts of guys. But he could also skid it through. I'm kind of looking for someone who has like kind of multiple skills, if that makes sense. And I think Bond is probably one of those. So high end is top 5. Low end is maybe 15 to 20. it was really early on in his career, and I thought he was incredible. But yeah, it's a really tough one to say. Oh, Shavam, there's absolutely no way I'm going to be able to read this. Imagine you're advising the BCCI with full political backing. I cannot imagine that. No. The BCCI's annual report shows there is a bank balance of 3.5 billion. Yeah, I reckon they should have a lot more than that. This means they have 3.5 billion in reserve and earn at least 200 million annually in pure cash as profits. Again, I think it's a lot more than that. What's my proposal? So if I had shitloads of money and I worked with the BCCI, my big thing is it doesn't cost a lot to build facilities in India, right? Compared to somewhere like England where land is a problem and everything else, right? Like there are lots of places where there are shitloads of cricketers. And I would also go as far as you could do this in Sri Lanka as well. You obviously, again, you don't need a lot of money to make a big difference in some of these countries. I would look at what Iceland did and trying to professionalize cricket almost at every level so that if you have any talent at the game, you have the ability to go to an academy that is not run by someone you have to pay. And you do not have to be so talented at 12 that you get free scholarship because you might go on to play for India. And then actually look at a brand of cricket, which would probably bring about, sort of Virat Kohli athleticism type of thing that you want more and more. You want everyone to sort of learn every single delivery that they can at a young age. You want them to continue, like I would almost have these academy systems that would also be run from a perspective of keeping the sort of rubber ball, tennis ball, tape ball style of things as well, right? Because I think that's some of the skills that we're seeing with people like Dhoni and Bumrah, and Varun Chakravarti and these sorts of guys. So I'd actually want to keep that going as well. But I want it so that any young Indian player has access to someone who understands what Indian cricket is trying to do for the next 20, 30, 40 years and is trying to upskill every single player so that they are not just good natural talents who might end up in an IPL or an Indian setup or a first class setup, but that they are all like being massively upskilled. I think that's the difference. That's what you're kind of looking for. And if you have that kind of money, that is what I would do. And then I would make sure that I dominate men's and women's cricket for the next 40 years. It's easy. Why doesn't everyone do this? Reese says, who is the best cricketer never to play for the big three? Garfield Sobers. Imran Khan. What is there's an English bowler I'm thinking of. Glenn Chappell's probably the best one I have seen. I think if you're going back, I think Glenn Chappell's probably the best. Like Glenn Chappell is, I still think was a fantastic cricketer, and especially I wouldn't say he's a batter or anything, but could also bat. And so I definitely think he's probably one. I'm trying to think if there's like an oldie one that I'm missing. England use so many players that it's actually hard for them to miss out on anyone. Best player not to play for Australia. I've given these answers quite a bit before. I think Matthew Innes, who's had a fantastically interesting career since leaving cricket, by the way, was one of the best players ever not to play for Australia. Let's have a look. During the golden era of everyone making runs, he took 281 wickets for Victoria at 25 as a left-arm bowler. I thought he was fantastic. I'm trying to think if there's someone else who just didn't make it. Jamie Siddons, is it Test cricket that you asked? Yeah, because Jamie Siddons does play for Australia, doesn't he? You could also go back to some of the Indigenous players, of course. You're talking about, God, what's the guy at the turn of the 1900s? Jack, why can't I remember his name? Jack Marsh. So Jack Marsh would probably be someone that you would be looking at. And then you would be looking at, God, why can't I think of any of these guys' names? There's also another one. Eddie Gilbert. That's the other name. So I suppose, yeah, you would probably have one of the Indigenous players is a fair chance of that. Matthew Innes. I feel like there's another cricketer. Yeah. I think those are the ones off the top of my head that probably missed out that should have played. Ian Harvey's an interesting one because we talked about him on a couple of shows recently. Like he would probably be in that discussion. Best player from India is probably one of the spinners from, is it Mumbai? I'm trying to think if they've had because all their fast bowlers would have played. Is there a great player who didn't play with the bats potentially? I'm trying to think. There's a guy whose name I'm thinking of very, very Padmaka Shivakla. Is that his name? I think. Let me just check if that's the guy. I mean, I think he takes 600 wickets, doesn't he? They've also had a couple of guys. Wait, I'm just looking up his record. Yeah, he was one of the Mumbai spinners I was thinking of before. He took 589 wickets at 19. And I'm pretty sure that Sunil Gavaskar said, like, that was one of the things he was talking about was, like, he got to face guys like that in the nets all the time. And he, this was definitely a world-class player, right? I don't think there's any argument that he wouldn't have been. And if you're a pace bowler, you probably just get picked because of injuries at one point. But they had 4 other spinners, and Bishan Beatty was around at the same time. And, what are you supposed to do? Best first class batting average. Is there someone else from India who has like a ridiculously high batting average who never got to play Test cricket? There's 2 of them, isn't there, from India? Or did they play a couple of games and maybe that's the story? Yeah, okay. Sugwika, who I think played for Maharashtra, he averages about 63. Let's see if I was right with the other guy as well. Oh, no, the other guy played 1 test. AJ Sharma played 1 test. So, yeah, you pick it out of that for those players. I think that's probably the best way of doing it. Connor says, our team plays on a variety of artificial and uncovered grassy pitches. In general, what lines of length variation work best on each? So, I mean, the thing about the artificial pitch is that it teaches you, it really does help you with swing bowling a little bit more than anything else. So I always, when we played on those wickets, we either played against guys who bowled very, very full and were always trying to swing the ball, or we played on people who kind of treated like it, and it depends on what kind of artificial wickets you have. But the ones that we have in Australia, which I think they have in other Southern Hemisphere countries, are on a concrete deck. And so the other bowler that we always found really difficult, to go up against was the guy who bowled that sort of, I'm trying to think of the test bowler, but that sort of armpit kind of like in and at you kind of delivery. Is that like a Josh Tongue, perhaps? That sort of length where it's sort of coming up at you and at your body a little bit, and you can't do much about it, right? If you're playing on uncovered grassy pitches, you just want to hit a length where you can hit the top of off stump as much as possible, and you almost want to be like the wall ball bowlers, right? And have that ability to let the pitch do what you want it to do. You don't need to over pitch in a way that you probably do on covered wickets. On artificial wickets. Generally, when we played on artificial wickets, so we played with a 2-piece ball because they needed to be a little bit harder. So I don't know if you do that, if they still do that these days, because in England they just don't play on covered pitches. So, like, it's not a thing over here. So I'm a little bit out of practice with those. Alex says, is Harmer a better bowler than Maharaj? Is the relaxing of the transformation policy at international level now making South Africa stronger? And which other players has it limited affected? No, in the long run, trying to transform South African cricket is the best thing they could do. Picking from a pool of 12 million players compared to trying to get that pool to 50 million, right? For men's and women's is what they should have always been doing. Is Harmer a better bowler than Maharaj? No, I don't think so. Maharaj has been magnificent over the last couple of years, Alex. I think that Harmer is perhaps better in India, and I think he's a lot better against left-handers. I think that you would pick Maharaj ahead of him pretty confidently. Not always through their careers, But it isn't just the transformation policy. Like this is where I think people go wrong, right? Everyone wants to go for the big obvious thing. The other reason that Harmer left is he was always going to be a fringe player in South Africa, right? Not just because of Maharaj, they had Shamsi as well, and Dane Pete's a really good bowler too. They had multiple options available to them, and he went to where there was going to be regular employment, right? People have forgotten that. There have been non-white players from South Africa and from Zimbabwe who have also gone to England for regular employment, right? We've had lots of different players of different ethnicity go and get that because you don't know you're going to be in the side all the time. You're better to do that. Dane Pete went to the West Indies. No, West Indies. Went to Major League Cricket. He was one of the first people that signed up there, right? So it's way more complicated than anyone ever makes out. You do not get paid a lot to be a domestic cricketer in South Africa. It is very hard to live a good wage on that unless you're a pretty regular South African player as well. The same wage in England for a county player is so much more, right? And you don't have to worry about getting dropped because you're Simon Harmer. You're just going to play, right? So it's way more confusing than I think a lot of people understand these sorts of things. It's also that, the transformation policy hasn't been handled well. As I've said before, they're trying to transform things in the wrong way. The way to do it is to go back to and listen to what I said about India before. And if you really want to fix the problem and you're a government, you can do it in South Africa. You really can get more people of varied backgrounds coming through. The problem with South African cricket, even more than race, has been where they get their cricketers from, which is almost predominantly posh schools. Far more than white players. You have to end up at a posh school, right, to end up playing for South Africa. Other than Philander, Steen, and the Morkels, I think the other 24 players who had played whatever I can't remember if it was 25 or 50 games, whatever it was, over a period of time. Everyone else went through a pretty high-end school at one point or another. It's so much more complicated, and it always is. All right, let us have a quick break here on the Wagon Wheel, and when we come back, we will do I have ads? I must have ads. Oh my God, he's taking all the ads out. What is Rakshit doing? We'll be back after this with more Wagon Wheel. My latest book is The Art of Batting. It delves deep into how the best players ever made their runs. Get your copy today. Ian says, on Aussie fan culture, I know population-wise it is smaller than England, but geographically many times bigger. Oh, yeah, true. Are there as many Aussie fans who do multiple tests in home ashes? No. So the main test that people would travel to is probably Adelaide. So you do get people traveling for the test, but generally they still travel for their home state test. So a lot of people from rural Victoria and rural Sydney and New South Wales will come into Melbourne and Sydney. And a little bit for Queensland, and certainly that happens for Adelaide. But so to point it out, Ian, until I became a cricket writer, I'd never seen a test match in another city. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. I was supposed to go to Warner McGrath's last test, but I'd been unemployed for ages and just got a job and couldn't afford it and would have lost my job that I just got. So yeah, it's not easy to do. It's become, I suppose, a little bit more accessible now. Like, when I grew up, airfares were so expensive, where obviously it's not quite the same. But traveling around Australia at Christmas can still be quite expensive. So there's a little bit of it. But no, nothing like England, where people flock in from everywhere. And I would say generally in Australia, when I'm staying at a hotel for a test match venue, it will be rural fans or it'll be opposition fans. It's very rarely someone who's come up from another city. There are little bits, but nothing compared to England or some of the other countries. Rob says, do you know or have any stats on how many dismissals caught at slip were caught in each position? Because I'm wondering what percentage are caught at third and fourth slip. Is it worth having fielders there? There must be some opportunity cost to more slips. Yeah, I've done a piece on this before. I don't have the stats. CricViz have the stats, I think. But yes, I mean, I'm pretty sure CricViz would have to answer this. My guess is that second slip gets the most edges. So if that's the case, first slip and third slip would be second and third. So I don't think there's such a drop off, right? I think there's a reason why teams have kind of a little bit gone away from first slip as an automatic position. And there's certain things. I think really what you have to do is read the pitch and read the conditions in order to sort of understand those sorts of things, right? Like I do think that's a big part of it. And so there are certain pitches where you want a third and a fourth, and there are certain pitches where you want a first and a second. And there might be more of first and second than third and fourth, which I think is also fair. Reese says, in modern cricket, is weight of wickets or runs still the easiest way to figure out if a player is going to do well when they step up to international cricket? England seem to go off that characteristics when selecting young cricket. Weight of wickets and runs tell us the overall worth of a player, right? They don't tell us if that is going to translate to being a test player, right? Like there have been fantastic first-class players who quite rightfully have not been chosen for their countries, I think. It tells you that you're a quality player, like James Hildreth and Jamie Siddons, to mention a couple that we've brought up already. If all the tests were in their conditions, I think they would be absolutely fantastic players. I'm not sure how much it would have transmitted itself to all forms of cricket. So you should be looking at other things. You should be, as I said, Reese, most bowlers are most fast bowlers are chosen on what they do with the new ball in first class cricket. And once they get to test cricket, they're going to get less of the new ball than they usually do because the other two bowlers are being picked for their new ball stuff. So you really want to pick fast bowlers based on that. We now understand the same with spin bowling, right? What works for spin bowlers in non-Asian countries and Asian countries is quite often very different. So I think you have to continue to look for information outside of that. And I think in some ways teams always have, but we're getting a little bit more professional with it now. Josh says, in Jarrod Kimber's book, The Art of Bowling, pace. Not quite got to that one yet. He decided, much to everyone's disappointment, that during a top 50 bowlers was too much effort and ended up doing a tier list for bowlers since 1960. S tier, McGrath, Garner. I will be doing a tier list anyway. McGrath, Garner, Marshall, Hadley, Ambrose, Dane, Bumrah. S tier. No, I would put Imran in that tier. Yeah, I put Imran in that tier. He's the only one from A+ tier that I wouldn't have. I'm trying to think if there's anyone from... Yeah, I don't think I'd move anyone out of tier 1. I'm trying to think if there's anyone else in A+ tier. We've already got Garner. Where's Holding? Holding's probably A+ tier, isn't he? I would have thought. Bolt's probably not quite there. Oh, Makram's probably A+ tier as well. Yeah. That's off the top of my head. That's not looking at any numbers or anything, but that feels right. Abe says, I'm an academic by trade, working in moral and political philosophy, but also a cricket lover who wants to try my hand at cricket writing. I was curious if you had any thoughts, advice for someone coming up from outside discipline to find an authentic voice in cricket writing without sounding like they're artificially forcing their expertise into the sport. This is harder for me to answer because I had no expertise before, right? So it's not as if I was in a situation where where I had a great number of expertise when I came in. I suppose my expertise were more in fiction writing or documentary making. So maybe there's an element of that. Look, your job is to write about cricket in a way that other people haven't done it. It's as simple as that. And I think the biggest mistake that a lot of people make when they're trying to be a writer in general is they're trying to write like they think a writer writes. Don't write like a thinker writer writes. Like you think a writer writes. Like write like you can write. Like what is it that is dragging you to the keyboard to make you that kind of writer? That's the kind of writer that you should be. Obviously, you can find my posts on Medium. We do have a sports writing course or sports content making course, I suppose it is these days. It's down at the moment. It'll be up again soon. I know a few people have asked me about that. We've just basically we had to bring it down for technical reasons. And then when I was going to put it back up, I was like, this is probably the last time I'm ever going to change it. So I just want to get it right. And we're currently up at about 55,000 words. So I'm, hoping it's the course that really helps people understand what they need to do in that. But one of the things I always say is, why are you writing, Abe? Right? It may not be as a moral or political philosophy person either. But why are you writing? Because if you don't know that, you don't know what's dragging you to write and everything, um, you probably won't write anything particularly interesting. Person says the ICC is an events organization, pretty much. Given that, why is everything so last minute for the T20 World Cup in 3 months? It's just really hard to get the Indian government, the BCCI, to commit to anything sort of a long way out. Things change quite a bit as well. So the ICC don't want to be in a situation where they put stuff up and then changes, which has happened before. Yeah, there's lots of little things like that. But it's not, this is not, I would not say this is an ICC issue, because generally when in other boards, it seems to be just certain organizations are not set up for something like a year or 18 months in advance, right? It's unfortunately just how it's been going for a long time. It probably does need to change, but yeah, there's a few places in cricket that just struggle with literally just telling you these sorts of things. Lemon says, can you see the reverse ramp becoming the reverse sweep of pace playing pandemic and red ball cricket? I think the ramp averages about 25, right? Whereas the reverse sweep probably averages about 35 to 40. I could be wrong in this. I'm trying to remember. There haven't been enough ramps in Test cricket to work that out. I think originally teams thought it was pretty safe. And then when Root kept getting caught at slip, I think teams started to work out that actually you don't always get the ball over at slip. And if you watch people ramp in T20 cricket, quite often the ball goes in the air through the slips cordon, right? Sometimes it doesn't even reach short third. I think it will play a part in modern batting in red ball cricket. I don't think it's as... I say this as someone who hasn't ramped the ball very much. But I don't think the reverse sweep is that hard a shot, right? And I have played that a lot. And so maybe that's just me and it comes more naturally to me. And I've talked about, being a former tennis player and tennis coach. Once I worked out it was a double hand backhand, it became very easy for me to mentally go, backhand, great, done. And maybe there's a reverse ramp is like that for other people. The ramp's like that for other people. I just think it's harder. So I don't think it's ever got, and if you look at T20 cricket, there really aren't many ramps played. I've done the data before. We did a piece a few years ago, and we were shocked at how few actually came up. Nadika says, any books you recommend about early cricket history, pre-test match cricket? Yes, and now you're really testing it. Oh my God. Is it H.S. Altham? I'm pretty sure that H.S. Altham does one on early cricket. And then is it Roland Bowen? Is that his name? God. I think Roland Bowen might be the other one. I think he covers early cricket. I'm trying to think back to when I read all those books. And then John Major is another one who I think covers early Test cricket history as well, the former English Prime Minister. They're all pretty English, if we're being honest. But I suppose pre-Test match cricket was fairly English as well. But they are very, very English and through an English lens quite a bit. But those are the ones off the top of my head anyway, Nadika. Adityan said, while Jadeja and Akshar are more skilled than every visiting spinner, is there a case to be made visiting teams have better pace variation? I think he means pace variation than the two. Santner was bowling between 78 and 100 in New Zealand series. Now Harmer. I think that Ashwin was the one, if you go back, and I'm sure we've done these videos before, Adityan, you probably go find them, who was very good at finding the right pace for the pitch. I think Jadeja's always been more of a automaton, right? Like, if this is my pace, it's going to work in most places, I'm going to keep doing the same thing. I don't know about Akshar as much. I'm sure I've looked at it before, but I can't think of it. But yeah, I do think there is an element of over a period of time, they're probably right, and they will outbowl most of these guys. But on each individual pitch, they may not, right? Whereas that's where I think Ashwin was so good. He could, whether it be even in overseas conditions, he had the ability to change his game for what was needed at that time. Mob says, I don't know a lot about spin bowling. Could you please talk to me about the great variance in run-up and pre-delivery routine? Why is it some spinners try to run in a bit while others bowl from 2 steps? So you don't need a huge run-up if you're a finger spinner. This is probably one, I'm not the world's leading expert on this, but there are mechanical reasons why you need your different run-ups in different ways. It's very hard as an off spinner to come in with too big a run-up because a lot of it is sort of done at the crease, and it is a lot of the arm does the work. So you can bowl off spin off two steps like Chris Gale, Carl Hooper kind of does it off two steps. You can stop at the crease like Syed Ajmal did, Xavier Doherty did. So finger spin, you can kind of still get, because essentially you're using your shoulder and you're doing the revolutions. You're doing that pirouette that off spinners do, right? Leg spinners actually need to run in, and Shane Warne kind of ruined leg spin a little bit. Leg spinners should be coming in a lot faster, and they need a lot more motion through the crease. It's really hard to bowl international quality leg spin, or even domestic quality leg spin off two steps, right? Like maybe Warne could have done it. I'm not sure how many other people do. But I also think there's an element of like, we kind of just imitate what we see at any one time. And the Shane Warne one is the perfect example of that. Shane Warne probably ruined leg spin run-ups for a long period of time because they should be a lot faster. And a lot of people copied him, whereas actually the run-ups to copy were Anil Kumble and Shahid Afridi. Those were the ones you wanted, where you have a lot more momentum going through the crease. But yeah, so that bit I understand. There is something about the load up for off spinners specifically that you need to get right. And there's also a lot about trying to keep your hands as high as possible. So I have this in my action where I was told so much to keep my front arm so high. I end up a bit, and then you see Mushtaq Ahmed bowl. So you end up keeping your arms up almost as a precursor to this. So you end up with all these things. So it is, I've always tried to do this piece, Mob, but I've never quite got around to it. Aravind says, is the ability to pick the ball up early as important in women's cricket? Pace bowlers tend to operate. Yeah, it's as important in women's cricket as men's cricket. It's the same basic thing that you're doing. You still have an advantage over everyone else. But it's as important, Aravind, to do it against spin as it is against quick bowling. Right? It actually doesn't change all that much. You still need to be able to pick the ball up really, really quickly against spin bowling. And they're much slower than a women's seam bowler is. Abe says, just revisited your episode on the biggest bunnies in Test cricket. Would de Villiers be considered Broad's bunny in Test? 10 dismissals, an average of 16.3. He did far better against Anderson. I think he would be. You could put him in there. As to your question about why he'd have that, I don't know. I'm trying to think if there's a technical reason. Yeah. It would be early Broad, so it's maybe the outswing at that height. Maybe the outswing and bounce as a combination. Who else would have had outswing and bounce as a combination? A little bit Southey. Is there anyone else in Test cricket at that point? There wouldn't have been many, would there? Bovey doesn't get a massive amount of bounce. There weren't many outswing bowlers by then. So it's hard. Yeah, so maybe it was that. But yeah, that's a fascinating one, Abe. I can't think of any reason why. But yeah, I don't know if he makes a list because I can't remember the exact numbers that we had. But yeah, it sounds like he could be there. Sam says, county cricket has seen a lot of international players. Every season there's an article about an international player not being good enough for first team Shield cricket. Are there any fun examples of foreign players playing in the Ranji Trophy, West Indies Championship, or other domestic first class leagues? Yeah, West Indies, I just don't think there would ever be the money in it. Brendan Nash is probably one of the first ones, and he was trying to play for the West Indies. Ranji Trophy, I don't remember anyone. So a lot of Pakistani players, and was it Indian players as well? Certainly Pakistani players played club cricket in Bangladesh. So that's where they kind of went. South Africa had a lot of overseas players playing in their leagues. And New Zealand have had infrequent. Shield cricket's had infrequent players go through. But yeah, it really is a county thing more than anywhere else. Rohit says, provided there is no injury concerns, does South Africa's biggest available pool for ODI and T20 other than in India in terms of quality and quantity right now? ODI and T20. I'm just trying to go through their sides. Yeah, they don't. Yeah, I think so. Trying to think of. Yeah, I think they've got really good flexibility. I believe they can do multiple different options as well. Like they can go in with very different kinds of lineups, which I don't think England can. Can Australia? No, I think they're much more conventional lineups. Yes, I think so. It's hard when you ask a question like that. There's so many variables, but off the top of my head, it feels like a decent idea. Neil says, looks like Doggett has leapfrogged. Nisa, any intel on him and how ready he is? He looks like another guy who's picked up the wobble ball and is doing really, really well with it. I said in a previous podcast that he reminds me quite a lot of Matt Henry. Someone in the comments was like, he bowls more like Chris Wokes. I'm not talking about action. I'm more talking about what happens with the ball. He doesn't bowl he doesn't bowl like Chris Wokes off the pitch at all. He might have a similar action. I'm not really interested in the actions. I'm interested in what the ball does afterwards. And he's it doesn't lose a lot of pace off the wicket, which again Wokes does. Wokes is hitting the surface, whereas Doggett is sort of more skidding and for whatever reason, but still from a high release point like Henry. I think he's an interesting bowler. Nisa's 34. Like Nisa, because he can bat, is always going to be around until they find someone else who is a fringe test quality bowler who can bat, especially with Cummins' injury. But he's older, Nisa. I think Doggett is more a specialist bowler than him. Not that Nisa's not a specialist bowler because that's unfair, but at the moment, right? I also think they want to see what Doggett can do. Nisa's behind Jai Richardson and Doggett for me, and maybe even guys like Bartlett. Sashimi says, is there a specific reason why all Indian spinners inherently are better batters than their fast bowling counterparts? I'm not even talking about all-rounders like Akshar, Washington, etc. Even the next run of spinners like Dubé, Kotian. Oh, okay. I think traditionally, spinners are better batters than fast bowlers. Like I've never seen the numbers run, but I think traditionally there is, especially in some countries, there is almost a leaning towards it. But the athletic skills required to be a fast bowler do not always lend you to be particularly good as a to be particularly good as a batter, right? Like they're very different specialist skills. I don't think they're as wide between spin bowling and batting. And so I think that's a part of it. Sashimi says, I read somewhere that Callis is like the James Harden of cricket. I saw this one pop up, and I could not agree more. Massively overinflated stats with absolutely no ability to change the course of a game. No, so there's a big difference here. I think this is wrong. And the reason why it is wrong is Harden detracts from your side because you have to have a good defense. You have to stack the side around Harden to make it effective. You do not have to stack it around Callis to be effective. Callis can just play in his bubble, right, without having any impact on the other players and just be Callis, bowl his 20 overs a game, bat at number 4, pay no attention to everyone else, and catch flies at slip, right? And he's still going to be handy to you because it means you go in with 5 men, right? Harden actually detracts from it because in order for you to have Harden, you almost need to have 4 other players on the court who can play defense, right? You also, even on offense where Harden is a star, if the ball's not in his hand, he's still a negative, right? He doesn't cut. He doesn't set screens enough. He doesn't work hard, right? So Callis isn't a negative in his skills at any stage, and he allows you to go in with a more flexible lineup in any game that you play in. So I don't think Harden, and you've also mentioned Jadeja, actually fit in that at all. I actually think that's wrong. I think you've completely misunderstood their worth. Their worth is more than their stats. Where you're saying the people who look at those guys are only looking at their stats. Their worth is more than their stats. South Africa didn't win under Callis in a limited overs cricket for many different reasons. And I've covered that before. I've never said that Callis was the reason they didn't win those championships, right? He was part of an overall problem in the way that their top orders played, which I have gotten into in previous videos if you want to find out. But even in that, his extra ability with the ball was pretty important. South Africa regularly just picked the wrong sides and then played the wrong way, right? If you're talking limited overs cricket. they Jadeja has won, uh, Jadeja has probably became at his best when India weren't winning, but again gave them incredible flexibility. No, so I don't compare them to Harden. Shivnur and Chanderpaul might be a kind of Harden player in that because he has to play in his position at number 5, he actually makes inferior players play in tougher positions than him, and he doesn't give you anything with the ball, right? I think he was okay in the field, but he doesn't give you anything with the ball, right? And so, like, him not going to number 3 or number 4 when they really needed it, when they had no other batting at all, probably is up Harden. I still think he's not quite Harden. I don't know who Harden would be, though. Basketball is such a peculiar sport because there's only 5 people on the court. So even Chanderpaul, that feels unfair on. And I think if Chanderpaul was just on a more successful team, I don't even know if I would be comparing him to. I'm only comparing him to because I think there is a inflexibility that Harden has that Chanderpaul kind of had as well. But yeah, no, I think you're wrong, Sashimi. I mean, those players are worth way more than their stats. That's what great all-rounders are. They're worth more than their stats. Ajit says, what does India losing the first test against South Africa come down to? Indian batters not being as good against spin, or 4 world-class Indian spinners not being able to pick up wickets as fast as one South African spinner? No one's good at playing spin on those wickets. They wouldn't have been 40 years ago. They wouldn't have been 70 years ago. These wickets, especially with the pace and the skill that modern spinners have and the analysis that everyone has, everyone's going to struggle on those wickets. If you make it that random, you're going to have some surprise results. I was saying that in 2016. 9 years on, I'm still saying it. I don't think that Simon Harmer would have been able to have as big an impact, right? Simon Harmer only took 8 wickets, by the way. But I don't think Simon Harmer would have been able to have as big an impact if they had been flatter surfaces. And that's when having the 4 spinners would help. If you're going to pick 4 spinners, right, having a pitch that absolutely rags sideways doesn't make any sense. You actually want a longer period of time so that you always have a fresh spinner to be able to bowl, and the opposition does not. It's the wrong way of going about it. Also, that pitch had bounce and helped seam bowlers as well. So I just think it was a very random surface. They tried to make it into a pitch for spinners, and because of that, it was kind of just a pitch for all bowlers, and those are more lottery games. PJ says, Simon Harmer recently took his 1000th first-class wicket, an almost heard-of achievement in the modern era. In fact, he'll potentially be the last person to achieve this feat. He's been the top wicket-taker in English season twice, the top wicket-taker in South African season 3 times. I'm surprised he was only the top wicket-taker twice. He was player of the match in both the semi-final and final when Essex in 2019. His test record currently stands at 60 wickets at 24 from 13 tests, yet he still seems to be completely underrated and often forgotten about. Why am I going crazy? PSC also averages 13 when openly bowling in Test cricket, and he can bat. He can certainly hold a bat. Yeah, I don't know if he can bat. He didn't make himself available for a long period of time. PJ, right? That is a big part of it. Also, think that South Africa is really obsessed with spinning the ball away from right-handers. And every time I've ever talked to people in South Africa, you look at it, they had a left-arm wrist spinner who spun the ball away from right-handers more than he spun it in. They regularly convince left-arm wrist spinners to bowl left-arm finger spin. Left-arm finger spin is so, more highly valued, I would say, in South Africa than off-spin. Also, during Harmer's career, specialist off-spinners, outside of, Lyon and Ashwin, you don't see that many. Right? We are in an era where we don't see as many specialist off spinners at all. So I think there's a whole bunch of reasons why that has happened. I think he's a fantastic player. I still think in Test match cricket, I would probably have picked Maharaj. I think Maharaj was fantastic. But what I would have wanted is to have both of them around. Why were they not both around? Because there wasn't enough money in domestic South African cricket. Right? That's what it comes down to. There isn't enough money to keep him around. That's the issue here. Hurt says, I've seen England and Australian international players feature regularly in county and shield respectively. England players have not featured regularly in shield cricket. Don't know where you got that one. Where are you on the debate that Indian internationals should play domestic tournaments? Oh, you mean for themselves, for their own teams? Is that what you mean? Um, uh, would it help them or add unnecessary burden on already cramped schedules? Those other players are already playing less. Like Australian and English players over the last couple of years have played a lot less first class cricket than they used to. Um, they usually use it now if they're trying to ramp up for something. They don't always make themselves available. England players quite often can choose not to play first class cricket if they don't want to, or if they need a rest. I think there's a belief because in the old days that like you played first class cricket, there's a belief that like first class cricket is going to save anyone who's out of form. That's not really how these things work. I think that players should use it more when they need it. I think was it Mitchell Stark who literally said, "I just need to find some rhythm. I need to go off and play some cricket." I think that's where you use it, and if not, it doesn't really make sense for top level international players to be playing first class cricket all that much. There's so much games. There's so much travel. You want your players to be absolutely at peak, and if that might be for some players playing more first class cricket, which they should. And for other players, that will be playing less. This idea that it's a magic potion, which I think a lot of old timers think, it just isn't. It just doesn't work that way. And if I had a test player who I thought had the ability to play 100 test matches, I just don't want them grinding that down to 80 by playing more first class cricket than they have to. Right. The best example of this ever is having a look at how many first class games Darren Goff played compared to Jimmy Anderson. A Darren Goff who could have played for an extra 4 or 5 years, like that. Think of the England team that he would have been playing in. He's basically ground down to nothing, right? He didn't have to be. Hertz says, in a multiverse of a Kimberland, a group of Indian cricketers suddenly wakes up, realizes their true worth, and goes on strike to get a better slice of revenue pie. In full Reagan-style Counter-Strike, BCCI sacks that group and decides to solve the crisis by throwing obscene money at it. Your task was correct, but that's easy. I would never do scab work. I wouldn't even entertain this as a possibility of trying to do that. Yeah, BCCI can offer me as much money as possible. I'm not going to do it. You can't replace Kuldeep or Sundar internationally. Rishabh Pant, I don't know, do you ask Ben Duckett to keep? Or Jamie Smith, I suppose. Shreyas, do you get Kusal out of? And Jaiswal, I don't know. I don't know who the best young top order player is around the world that isn't Jaiswal. Yeah. Rohit says, is the New Zealand team of the 1990s and 2000s the perfect example of optimizing role players? They were always a team loaded with average batters, bits and pieces of players, and with one world-class all-rounder, and managed to form a really great team. Did they form a really great team, Rohit? I'm not sure they did. They were okay. I'm not sure you would say they're a really great team. If you just randomly take the period that you're talking about, so what? Let's say 1995 to 2005, and let's do ODI cricket in that period by team. That seems fair, doesn't it, for what you're asking about? I wonder what New Zealand's record was in that time. I wouldn't have thought it's incredible. I think there's a lot of romanticism. They really struggled for a long time, and I've talked to a lot of their players about it. It was grim at times. Let's have a look. Win-loss percentage. Their win-loss percentage from 1995 to 2005 in ODI cricket was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th. They did well with what they had. I don't think they had a lot of talent. They did have some really good all-rounders, as you point out there. They were not a great team. They were a struggling team who occasionally did some interesting stuff at World Cups. But yeah. Person says, why did India doctor the pitch to the level they did if they already blew up in their face in New Zealand and Dude, I don't know. I've said this before. I thought that now they would come in and just be like, we don't need to do this. I really don't believe they need to do this. And yet they keep doing it. I don't know. They're not going to win this series. But I said the same about Pakistan as well. Doctor it against the teams you're not sure you can beat. Right? Don't doctor it against the teams you're pretty sure you can beat. Not how I would do it. Rob says, in one of your pieces on the first India-South Africa test, you mentioned that South African spinners bowl more unplayable deliveries. Is it better to bowl more threatening deliveries with moderate spin rather than unplayables? No. So generally, if you can spin the ball over 3.5 degrees, do that. I know it sounds counterintuitive, Rob, but if you're spinning the ball over 3.5 degrees more often, and that's an unplayable delivery. I think it's over 4 degrees for unplayable. I can't remember. Himanish might need to help us exactly, or Varun. But if you're spinning it that much, there will still be balls that will go dead straight, right? Just because that's the way that cricket works and everything else. So you don't have to be able to do that. But the more unplayable deliveries, the harder it is for a batter to get any kind of rhythm. They don't know what shots to play. They don't know how to plan, right? Always do that. I think it's slightly different in pace bowling, right? I think in pace bowling, you could argue that you probably want, if you're bowling just unplayable deliveries, they have to hit the stumps. But spinners are hitting the stumps a lot. So their unplayable deliveries are going to be bowled in LBW more than a pace bowler. So if you're bowling unplayable deliveries for a pace bowler, unless you're bowling the one that angles in and takes the top of off stump, or the one that maybe is floating away and then hits like the top of leg stump, most unplayable test deliveries are just going to go through the wicketkeeper. If you're doing them as spinners, you're still a big chance of hitting the stumps or getting an LBW. Nadika says, what are your thoughts on John Boy Media starting a new channel exclusively for cricket? I didn't know he'd done that. Any chance for collab? Yeah, we should have collabed years ago. I have sent him messages before. I remember, the ICC asked, I don't know if I gave them the original contact for John Boy, but I know there was someone from the ICC who wanted to talk to them. I put him in touch. I've helped him out a couple of things with like behind the scenes stuff, even stuff that he doesn't even know, but there were issues with his account and stuff that I was trying to help out with. But yeah, for whatever reason, we just haven't done it. But yeah, I'd happily do that. But I get asked this about once every month, and I always say, yeah, I'll do it, and then I just forget. He probably gets asked the same, and probably does the same. We're both really busy. I would say that with me and John Boy, you're not just looking at creators, you're looking at people that run media organizations. And his is much bigger than mine as well. Like, there's probably thousands of things that me and John Boy want to do. Ashwin says there's no point in defending the ball off the back foot in Australia. Either defend off the front foot or leave the ball. Well, it makes sense. I wanted to pick your brains about this for more juicy snippets. Oh, interesting. I don't think that's true if you're an Australian player. I could kind of see his point if you're not from Australia. I think if you're an Australian player, even a South African player, I don't think that's a big issue. I would say don't play a back foot defensive shot that isn't at your body, though. Like, I'm trying to think back to when we were playing when we were younger. Yeah, you probably don't want to hang the bat out, and which is essentially, I think, what he's saying here, right? Because it's very hard to hang the bat out if it's away from your body without a straight blade. I think you do want to play back foot defensive shots in Australia because actually you can get quite a lot of runs around square leg. Because the ball hits your bat so hard that you can kind of angle it, in front of square leg, behind square leg, in a way that maybe in other countries the ball will stop a little bit more dead off your bat, and maybe that is harder. But yeah, I can certainly, if it's outside off stump and back of a length, there is no reason to ever defend it. I think if it's at your body, you still have to play the back foot defensive shot. But maybe he's talking about that sort of off stump thing. And I do think Australia get a lot of cheap wickets with overseas players with that shot. I don't think you need to be as algorithmically coded as the way that you've put it, and he might not have been saying that. But I don't think you have to be quite that full on with it. But there's some truth in what he's saying. I don't know if it's quite the same for Australian players. Mob says, from a captaincy perspective, what do Australia gain or lose in terms of player management, psychology, setting the tone of the series by having Smith instead of Cummins? Yeah, I wonder if Cummins isn't the more suited captain to go up against Bazball just because he will put the fielders out on the boundary line and they're really big grounds. Is there an element of that where you could argue that Smith might not do that as much, and that might cause some issues? I mean, we already know that was a hot conversation between them in 2023. I think if you still have the level of planning that Cummins and McDonald were doing with Smith's tactical knowledge, his tactical freedom, I think that's probably an advantage, right? But I wonder how much Cummins has listened to Smith anyway, right? Like, but maybe some of that, Smith is a bit more free-flowing when it comes to tactics. And Cummins is a little bit like, well, we had this idea. He'll cycle through his ideas a little bit slower. So maybe Smith is quicker to grab those things. But I think that McDonald and Cummins are much better planners than Smith, right? I thought from the moment that Cummins has taken over, it's felt like the team is just a little bit more organized and solid in those sorts of plans. It's something that Australian cricket hasn't always done, and Cummins has really brought something different, I think, about that. Other than that, I don't know. You'd still rather have Cummins on the field because he can bowl, right? Aravind says repeated rolling out of extreme pitches, despite plenty of evidence and situations in the past, has weaponizes opposition spinners who, although sometimes are very good, are not at the level of those in your team. And then deciding to pick 4 spinners on said pitch when it's hard to give 3 of them a go. Yeah. Or while you have a cheat code in Bumrah. Okay. Yeah. Can you help me understanding the reasoning of this? No, I cannot. I'm not sure I agree with it when they were winning all the time. So I'm probably the wrong person to ask about this, because I just think if you had normal attritional Indian pitches, I don't know how you beat India in India, right? Yeah, I just don't know how you beat them. If you've got Ashwin Jadeja and add third spinner when they wanted to, I just do not know how another team beats that, right? Whereas there's a randomness that is brought in when you do things this way, right? Yeah, so I do think there's a bit. I don't know how to answer that question. Sam says, in the sick, twisted part of the football content world I inhabit, there is recently been discourse around the correct term for 4 goals. All right, thinking people agree that double hat tricks is insane. Football Manager 07 used the term hatful. Personally, I would incorrectly break out the Latin GCSE and use hat quack. It would be, of course, it's double hat trick. Because Australia came up with that years ago, and I grew up with it, Sam. Forfer? They should call it forfer. Ajit says, in football soccer, the team taking the first penalty kick wins almost 60% of the time. I didn't know that. With some people saying it's just coincidental, others think it is a genuine psychological tactic. Do you think there is some kind of tactical advantage in a super over 2? Ooh. There's something to be said, isn't there? Like, as someone who played a lot of tennis, I always thought it was better to serve first than second, right? Because you have the game. The other person is constantly... I think there's an emotional drain when you're constantly having to try and level the scores back, right? Even though you know in tennis and men's tennis anyway, there's a natural pattern there. And I would say the same thing would happen in the penalty kick-out. I don't know if it would happen in super overs, though. Maybe it is. I mean, I've never checked the data, so maybe there is a big difference. But it just doesn't feel as the same as those other 2 do. I mean, I think if you look at Test cricket and the way that Test cricket is played, I think a big part of it is, again, the runs on the board thing, while it's probably been overdone in cricket over the years, actually, when you think about it, is a part of why batting first makes more sense. Because, again, it's the drain of they've made 350 and we've got to get to 350 and everything else. So I think there's elements of that there. We'll finish off with the super chats. Jessica's she's like, these guys are doing a live in my time zone. I'm all over it. Or is that from the last show? That actually might be from the last show. My super chat was missing the Ashes preview. Oh, sorry, mate. According to Jarrod, is Steve Smith the best batter of this generation? Yeah, he's the best test batter of this generation. I have him quite comfortably above Joe Root. if we're talking Test cricket, of course. If we're bringing all format, then obviously Kohli comes flying back into that. But if we're just talking Test cricket, then without a shadow of doubt, that is the case. Sorry, Mr. Super Chat. At the end of the show, it's hard because people put them in right at the end. Sheratank. It says, WBBL is one of my favorite tournaments to watch, partly because of the vibes commentary. I was wondering if there's any way the best players can play MBBL. No. It's a different sport. The ball's different. I know it sounds like a little thing. I mean, it literally is a little thing. But yeah, it would be very, very different. It's not the same. Ekant says, what technical adjustments do you think Joe Root will make for the Ashes? I think I talked about this, Ekant, the other day, which is what you're asking about, which is I think one of his main superpowers is getting off strike. And I think the shot that he uses to get off strike in Australia, which goes back to what Ashwin was saying, is much harder to play in Australia. I don't think there'll be a technical adjustment. I think if he's smart, he just has to be prepared for the fact he won't be off strike as much. He's still good enough to be on strike. So I'm not too worried about that. Yeah, I'm not too worried about that. But yeah, I can certainly see why that would be. Yeah, I can certainly see why you're asking that. What's his name? The scene uploader. Let me just find his. Feel Indian Asian seamers don't upskill at wobble ball because they only get the new or old ball at home where swing is enough. If Ashwin was a seamer, he would have been all over it. Bumrah someday. Bumrah certainly can bowl the wobble ball. Siraj has been bowling it pretty consistently. There was a period of time when Australians weren't bowling it, and it was just because it was before the Kookaburra ball was changed. They just didn't think it would work. It's never going to be as useful in Asia. I still think it's more useful than swing bowling, though. So I think we will probably see people come through and bowl more wobble ball. But yeah, I think the 3/4 seam, the Siraj ball, is probably more interesting when it comes to that. Ekant says, how about us defend balls into the ground and then have it roll and not bounce? That's just about soft hands, right? So, the softer that you defend a ball, the less chance it is of bouncing, right? Hard hands usually bounce and soft hands usually don't. And not all players have soft hands, blah, 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 blah. But, as Bart asked the question, I think he has. How much of a boost would Ashwin's record get if India had a quality left-arm seamer? Okay, so I've looked into this a lot. It doesn't matter. The reason is that even when you have a quality left-arm seamer, you would need the opposition to also have a quality left-arm seamer, and you'd probably need 3 to 4 left-arm seamers in the game to have a massive impact. I've been told this by cricketers forever. I've looked into the data. It does not hold up. The idea that an off-spinner can bowl into the foot marks from a left-arm bowler is really rare. Maybe Syed Ajmal, when Pakistan had like 93 left-arm seamers, got a bit of a bump. But we've looked at this time and time again. I've had international coaches contact me about this, going, Jarrod, I think you're wrong. Can you check your numbers again? I keep looking it up. It's just not a thing. There's just not enough left-arm seamers. And then also, this is going to sound weird, but you also need bruising bowlers, right? Because if you've only got 1 or 2 left-arm seamers, you need Brett Schultz or Muhammad Irfan. You need someone who's like big and strong as a left-arm bowler. Because a lot of left-arm bowlers are quite dainty, right? And if you don't have as many of them, you really need someone who's going to rip it up. Dougie Bollinger might have been someone who could have done that, right? Possibly. He's a big dude, running through the crease. But yeah, all things considered, off-spinners, I'm not saying off-spinners never get right, you will get it, but it doesn't change their records. I've looked in the 4th innings. I've looked in the 3rd innings. I've looked at off spinners in first-class cricket who've told me this. It doesn't play. Cricketers really believe it, though, but I don't think it plays. What are your favourite lines? Top of off stump? Is that what you mean? Cricketing and otherwise. I don't know. I don't know if I think of lines. It's funny. I just did a big podcast for the William Hill Sportsbook Awards, and Adrian Durham was one of the hosts, and he was going through a bunch of lines in my book, and I didn't remember half of them. Like, I don't remember my own lines. I kind of remember the piece. I suppose there's a great line of dialogue in... it's a Lee Marvin war movie. I should remember the director's name. The Big Red One. There's a great line in The Big Red One where it's such a beautiful line where there's like a gay doctor or nurse, male nurse, who kisses the prisoner of war patients when they're unconscious, like, feels them up, kisses them, whatever. And he does it to Lee Marvin. And Lee Marvin obviously is awake, wakes up, kills him, I think, straight away, and then says to the dead body, I don't mind you kissing me, Franz, but you've got bad breath. No, Fritz. It's Fritz. I always love that line. I was like, it's like, you don't expect that. There's something about it in a war film that it's like, it's really a progressive line, but it's also like this, it's funny in a way you're not expecting it. It's a really, really heavy film. I've always remembered that line. In fact, when I briefly had a movie blog, I think it was called Fritz's Bad Breath. So yeah, maybe that one. I do love screenwriting, so I'm sure I've got lots from movies. There's a line that's attributed to me. Oh, actually, I won't say that one, but I don't think I wrote that line anyway, and I'm not sure how much I like it. But there's one that always bangs around. If you're thinking about lines I've written recently, I can tell you this. I think the Metamorphosis line on Matt Henry is some of my best work. And I'm really disappointed that I haven't got like lots of emails going, Jarrod, I can't believe you took us all the way through your most improved player and finished with the phrase Metamorphosis. So yeah, I'll go with that. I can remember that one. Thank you to everyone who super chatted today and did all the other things as well, all the normal comments and everything. I know we went back to back, so I hope you like that. And sometimes we just have to do that on this channel. Lots of big things coming up. If you haven't seen the most improved player, it really is a cool video. I really hope you will enjoy it. We've got, what's today, Tuesday? We've got an Ashes video going up tomorrow, which is how England win the Ashes when they win it in Australia, which I think is fascinating. And some other really cool stuff. We're kind of holding a few things for the Ashes. I think we've got another one on South Africa that we really want to do as well. We've got a lot of feature pieces that we're trying to get to over the next month. So hopefully we'll get out about another 4 or 5 video essays over the next month as well. So there's going to be heaps of content on the main channel. And obviously we've got a Kim Apper in the morning. So there's probably no chance of anyone staying up now and coming back for Kim Apper in the morning, because that won't be the same time zone, but we'll be around for that one as well. But please like, subscribe. If you listen to these things on audio, 5-star reviews really, really help. Commenting, sharing, do all those things. All of it means a lot to us at Good Areas. Buy my book. I'll see you again soon. This video is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. If you want to be part of the community that makes content like this, head over now.